Hello, my bookish darlings. As we sit here today, Roe v. Wade has just been overturned. This has rolled back the rights of women to make the choice on whether or not they have control over their own bodies. And now many people are concerned, including yours truly, that the court is going to overturn gay rights as well as same-sex marriage. So I decided that it is about time I speak up about Orson Scott Card. And since I've done video essays on problematic science fiction and fantasy writers before, notably David Eddings and Marion Zimmer Bradley, so I thought I might as well address Orson Scott Card, who is one of the most homophobic authors of all times. And I know I've mentioned that I don't read him anymore before, but I thought I would go into details. Who am I? I am the BookTube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. And who is Orson Scott Card? He is a prolific author of many great science fiction and fantasy novels, notably the Ender's Game science fiction series and the Alvin Maker fantasy series. I've read from both series and I think they are indeed great works. But this video is in no way about the books. It is not meant to detract from these works or say that they are bad, because Card is a great writer, especially his Ender's Game series. Orson Scott Card's views weren't on anyone's radar until around 2008 when gay marriage first began to be fought in courts. But his conservative Mormon views can be traced back almost 20 years earlier when he published essays on Mormon websites. This was years after the Ender's Game book was published, but the websites were pretty obscure and only really read by conservative members of the Church of Latter-day Saints. He took some pretty hardline stances against the gays at the time, saying, quote, "One thing is certain, one cannot serve two masters, and when one's life is given over to one community that demands utter allegiance, it cannot be given to another. The LDS Church is one such community. The homosexual community seems to be another." He goes on to say that tolerance of gays in the Mormon Church, that's the LDS Church, would destroy the church. Well, fair enough. I'm not Mormon, and churches can do what they want in my humble homosexual opinion. Card, by the way, is super Mormon. He is the great-great-grandson of Brigham Young. I suppose that's not so impressive when you find out that Brigham Young had 56 wives and now has over 30,000 descendants. But then Orson Scott Card moved on from the church and to the law. He stated, quote, "Laws against homosexual behavior should remain on the books, not to be indiscriminately enforced against anyone who happens to be caught violating them, but to be used when necessary to send a clear message that those who flagrantly violate society's regulation of sexual behavior cannot be permitted to remain as acceptable equal citizens within that society." So yes, Card advocated the criminalization of the big bad gays, though he compassionately said gays should not be jailed. How magnanimous of him! Laws against those darn gays should be used to protect marriage and the family, so we should not be jailed, just merely ostracized from polite society. He popped off again in 2004, writing an essay in the Ornery American claiming that gays were made gay through seduction or rape or molestation or abuse. And this pretty much tracked that old, now debunked claim that being gay was some sort of disease that was passed down through grooming and abuse. I was still reading Orson Scott Card in the 90s. I'm not sure if I was reading him in the early 2000s, but either way, I had no idea of his views, and his views were pretty much confined to the Mormon or conservative community. Things weren't like they are now, where opinions can never be confined to small groups. Rather, they shoot across the Twitter sphere like a cat being bathed. Ever try to bathe a cat? In a nutshell, his views were his views and pretty much isolated to his little sphere of like-minded conservative thinkers. But that changed in 2008. For a brief history of rainbow weddings, Gavin Newsom, the mayor of San Francisco at the time, shocked the world and legalized marriage in his city in 2004. By the way, I married my husband during that brief time, which makes me part of history. Or does that make me just seem old? But the court stopped those marriages, and those marriages, including mine, were voided because the city exceeded its authority. But that was a narrow ruling, and the courts did not decide on whether or not it was unconstitutional to ban gay marriages. But they did take the issue up in 2008. Then the courts ruled that same-sex marriage was a fundamental right in the state of California. For another window of time, gays were allowed to marry, and I married my husband for the second time. But then there was a backlash. Proposition 8, called back then Proposition Hate.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
It was a ballot initiative that would amend the California state constitution to eliminate the right for same-sex couples to marry. Spoiler alert, it won. Yes, Proposition Hate won, and no more gay marriages were allowed in California.
No! No!
That is, not until the Supreme Court overturned Prop 8 in 2013.
Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy.
And if you are curious, those of us who were married in that window when it was legal, we were allowed to keep our marriages intact, so I did not need to wed my husband a third time. But backing up to Proposition Hate, I was living in San Francisco at the time, and let me tell you, there was a lot of fear among the LGBTQI community that the population at large was turning on us. There were huge demonstrations, and yes, I may have attended a few, and both sides were rolling out massive campaigns to support their respective positions. Enter Orson Scott Card. Whether or not you think his opinions were personal and religious and confined to like-minded people up until this point, that changed when he began opining publicly and campaigning for Proposition Hate. He said that gay marriage would mark the end of democracy in America. No hyperbole there. No siree. He ended by saying, quote, No matter how sexually attracted a man might be toward other men, or a woman to other women, and no matter how close the bonds of affection and friendship might be within same-sex couples, there is no act of court or Congress that can make these relationships the same as the coupling between a man and a woman. This is a permanent fact of nature. The coupling between a man and a woman. Let us put our hands together and give thanks to holy copulation. Oh, if the horrors of same-sex marriage came to your town or city or state or country, Card stated, quote, "When government is the enemy of marriage, then the people who are actually creating successful marriages have no choice but to change governments by whatever means is made possible or necessary." Yes, Orson Scott Card was advocating insurrection, and he calls himself a conservative. What conservative would ever advocate insurrection?
Enemies foreign and domestic! Let's go, Nick! Go! Watch out!
Oh yeah. During the battle for Proposition Hate, one pro-hate organization rose up, orchestrating much of the support for this horrible proposition, pumping millions of out-of-state dollars into California and activating their rabid followers across the country. That organization was called NOM. Nom, 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 nom. Not that NOM. This NOM stood for National Organization of Marriage, which was created specifically to pass Proposition Hate. And guess what? Orson Scott Card became a member of NOM's governing board. No longer was he just a science fiction and fantasy writer who happened to have socially conservative views. Maybe you could look past that, or not. But now he was a board member of NOM. Freaking NOM. Now he was politically involved in promulgating anti-gay propaganda. Now he was a danger to myself and my husband. So no, I cannot read Orson Scott Card anymore. I do not support him. I don't like the man. But as an aside, I do support anyone who enjoys his book. Like I said earlier, this has nothing to do with his writing. I recognize he's a fantastic writer, and I'll stand by Ender's Game as one of the classics of science fiction. Read whatever you want, and don't ever feel ashamed of it because you may not like the author. You have succeeded in being able to separate the art from the artist, and I applaud you. And I'm a little bit jealous of you because I can't do that with Orson Scott Card. Card is still writing, by the way, still being published. He's active on Twitter if you want to check him out. He's won Nebulas and Hugos. Ender's Game, again, is listed in many lists of top science fiction novels ever. And I don't even disagree with that. I'm just here to share what I personally no longer read Orson Scott Card, and it's up to you to make your own decisions, and no decision you make is wrong. But I'm curious. Let me know in the comments what you think of Orson Scott Card and whether you still read him or what you think of his books. And please, let's keep this conversation civil. While you're at it, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you want to see another writer expose, you can find some right here. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.